This is the balance dilemma. We tackle the often uniquely, but not always, female dilemma, managing life, work, family, and self. I'm Maura Carlin.
And I'm Christie Derrico. At the Balance Dilemma, we speak with women and men to hear their balance stories. Our guests are entrepreneurs, reinventors, creators, executives, parents, and partners, telling us what we really want to know. How the heck did they manage that? And can you have it all and all at the same time?
Our guest is Alexia Connellan, an award winning jewelry designer and owner of her own firm. Christy and I met Alexia when she spoke at an event called How to Curate the Good Life, defining your strategies to live as you truly desire, which naturally caught our attention. She describes her evolution from a successful career in information technology to a gemstone expert and designer. And as it is for so many of us, Alexia's path was paved with curves, detours, and pivots. One constant, though, is the way she has described herself: artist on the inside, businesswoman on the outside. We just love that. So thank you for joining us, Alexia. And let's start at the beginning because your story is also an immigrant journey. Tell us about that.
Well, thank you so much, Christie and Maura. I really appreciate you having me here today to talk about my story and hopefully to influence other people to try new things in their life. Yes, I was born in Jamaica, and my family emigrated when I was about 4 years old. So I arrived in America with a very thick Jamaican accent, which no one could understand except other Jamaicans. But over time, it's kind of settled into a nice East Coast New Jersey accent.
So how was it coming here and fitting in and, being both Jamaican and American?
It was really interesting because when you're in a culture and you're surrounded by it all of the time, you don't question the things that go on or what other people do and why. But being an immigrant meant that I could see the differences between Jamaican and American culture. And so it allowed me to observe both of them and to think about the good points and the bad points of each. And so it allowed me to kind of choose what my beliefs and my belief systems were because they were constantly being challenged. Because at home, my parents might say X or my grandmother might say Y, but then I'd go to school and I would hear Z or I would experience A. And growing up in New Jersey, I grew up in South Jersey in Cherry Hill. It was a very diverse place. I came across people of all races, all religions, all types of beliefs. And so I was learning and being challenged constantly. And I picked up a lot of things along the way. So in that sense, it was a great experience. And I wouldn't change anything because I love the unique perspective that I have on life.
Do you think, Alexia, that there's anything from your Jamaican roots that has influenced this new artistic endeavor that you have embarked on?
Well, I think Jamaicans love beautiful things and Jamaicans love jewelry. Like gold and gold bracelets were always a part of the culture. Less so now, especially after the crash in 2008, where a lot of people sold their jewelry in order to survive. But before that, when I was growing up, a lot of people wore lots of gold jewelry. Now they really don't do that anymore, but they do appreciate looking at it and they appreciate beautiful things because we're surrounded by beauty all the time. I mean, my part of Jamaica is the rainforest. So we have orchids, we have lagoons, we have waterfalls, we have hummingbirds, we have every type of flower. I could recognize fruit just by the shape of the leaf. It's like, oh, that's a guava. It's going to be bearing at this time. Oh, that's tamarind. That's a star apple. That's a soursop. So we really appreciate it. And Jamaicans really take care to look good all the time. So they're just obsessed with presentation. They think that life should be beautiful.
Love it.
And I assume that includes color.
Oh yeah, love color. The more color, the better. And when you're in the tropics, that's just normal. So yes, definitely.
It seems though you also had instilled in you or you developed something about the importance of education. You're multilingual. You went to Columbia University. You've gone back to school for jewelry design. Where did that all come from?
I'd say it's also a very, very Jamaican thing. Jamaicans are very proud to be educated. And for instance, my cousins back in Jamaica, we get standard or they get standardized testing every year, and they will announce on the radio like who the top student in math was for each grade. And they will talk to their family and congratulate them for getting the highest score. And it's like a competition. And many of my cousins always get like top in math. Although I always say I'm great at math without numbers, which is logic, like whether it makes sense or not. But so I think it's definitely a cultural value where I come from that you should never stop learning.
So it's interesting. You're not the first Jamaican to mention radio to me. Is that a big means of communication still on the island?
You know, I haven't lived there since I was so young, but in the past, I spent the summers with my grandparents, and radio was a big thing because you're always listening to the radio if you're like in the taxi or you're in the car. And people would like, if there's bad weather and hurricanes and your TV's not working, you would tune in on the radio. And there are definitely hurricanes in Jamaica. And so it's like a part of your safety plan is to listen to the radio and hear where there may or may not be flooding, what the escape routes are. So yes, I'd say it was a part of the culture. I don't know if it is now because everyone has one or two phones, so it's it's different.
I think it might be because you're not the first one to mention it. So tell us about this pivot. And you started in one career and you've gone to another. Tell us about that.
Um, you know, in my mind, I was always doing the same thing, which is to create something beautiful and something new that excites people and that people want to look at and interact with, whether that was doing photography. And I did wedding and commercial photography for some years, whether it was doing web design and helping to build websites and to maintain the information architecture, or whether it's in jewelry. So it's always that systematizing and making it beautiful, arranging it in a way that people like and that they have access to. So I feel like I'm using the same skills over and over again, but just in different environments or different careers.
And before we got on the air, you were talking about how your education background is still something that is part of what you're doing today. Tell us about that.
Wow, I don't know how to approach that. I just say that I love learning. I love learning new things, and every day is an opportunity to learn something new. So this year, I wanted to dive deeper into making jewelry myself because as an artist, you always want things to look the way they do in your mind in real life. And I find that with my jewelers and with my team, they're 99 or 98% there. But wouldn't it be great if they could be 100%? So I decided to go back and to learn more bench skills, as in more of the skills of making jewelry so that I could have my vision be perfect.
Did you always see yourself as an artist?
Yes. Even when I was a kid, before I could talk properly, I was sketching and drawing, and I'd try and put my name next to my artwork, and it would just look like scribble. And people would go, "What is that?" I go, "It's my signature because this is my creation." So I was always like that, always looking, always observing, always translating. It's just a part of who I am.
But I want to go back to this point you were making about creating the jewelry. Listeners may not understand. To walk us through how a piece goes from your imagination to my neck or my ears or anyone's. That sounds so interesting to me, and what's involved, and tell us what you mean about trying to do it with your own hands so that that image is in the final product 100%.
Well, you could start a piece or a collection in a couple of different ways. Sometimes it's with an overarching concept, like I'm going to, do a beach themed collection. Or sometimes it's just from a gem and saying, wow, this is a really beautiful gem. And when I look at it, I see the piece around it and I want to create that piece. So however you come up with it, come up with the concept. And then for me anyway, it goes into a sketch. So I do a sketch, but it's a technical sketch. So it's like an architecture and engineering concept. I do the top view, the side, all of the details, and they're all to scale because and then I write out the plan for how I would like it to be made and what the material should be and the reasoning behind it. And then the jeweler will take their caliper, which is like a measuring instrument, and it has to be to the millimeter. So they will measure it and they will say it's, this or that millimeter, and then look at the plan that I've written for them and try and build it that way. And if it's not quite making sense to them, they'll go, up, hold on a second. And, we might need more or less of this, or, I would prefer to set the gem this way. Why do you want to set it that way? And then we converse and we explain. And they usually get it, 98 or 99% of the way there, which is really, really high. But maybe sometimes there's some things that I would do a little bit differently. Maybe I would set the stone a little bit higher or lower so it wouldn't catch on something. Maybe I would have done the engraving a little bit deeper to give it more shadows and more drama. And jewelers, they're artists too. So it's like two artists having a conversation. We're not always going to agree. And they might envision it the way they've always seen it in a book. But I'm trying to come up with something new. I want to create something new. And sometimes I get pushback on that. And, we have to find a way to make it work for both of us. But if I was doing it myself, then like describing a painting to someone and having them paint it is very different than painting it yourself.
And do they make a wax mold? What is the
it depends. Sometimes they make it 100% by hand. And there's some things that require that it must be made by hand, either because it's a very thin or fine piece of metal. And if you're casting a piece of metal, it's soft, so it bends and it's flexible, and you don't want that because your jewelry will break. But some things you can cast. So you can either carve a piece of wax and then cast that piece and turn it into metal, or you could do it on a computer with a CAD design program where you type in commands and it builds the piece, and then you 3D print it into wax, and then you cast it. So it depends on what the usage is. Like these earrings that I'm wearing, they were made by hand. And you can't see it, but there's a very thin wire behind it. And maybe you could cast it, but if you did while you were wearing it, or like, just handling it, the wire could bend. And I would be very uncomfortable with that personally. I want a piece that's made to outlive you and still look fabulous.
I'm noticing your necklace. Is that
Right.
one of your designs?
Yes, it's also one of my designs.
So for people who are listening to this, you have a very thin gold chain that goes through it's not a circle, it's a square.
It's an octagon.
And then a dangling gem on the bottom. It's so stunning. Tell us how you created this.
Well, I looked at the gem and I said, I love this gem from every angle. I would like to make it in a piece that kind of dances, that has a lot of movement to it. And it's a chrysoberyl, which is the same type of gem as an alexandrite, but it does not change color. Alexandrites can change from green to orange, or the really beautiful, expensive ones from red to green, or kind of teal to purple. But this does not change color because it has different trace element minerals inside of it. Instead, it just kind of looks like a honey brown color. And I said, okay, I want this gem to dance because I love the cut and the way the light reflects off of it. And that honey color kind of reminds me of the 70s. So I want to do like a 70s inspired piece. And so I thought, okay, dancing 70s Studio 54. I said, there it is. It's going to be the Studio 54 necklace. So I did a piece that kind of looks like claws wrapped around the gem. And on the side, there's the little moon from the moon and spoon symbol from Studio 54. And I did it without a clasp. So the loop is the same shape as the gem, and it just goes through and it kind of dangles. And when you move, it moves. But there are diamonds all around the piece. So no matter what angle it is, it's going to look fabulous. And it's so fun.
That's awesome. But it brings me to this question of, do you start with, gee, I'd like a piece that does X, or does the stone or gem tell you what it needs to be?
For me and the way that I design, most of the time the gem tells me what it really needs to be beautiful. And there are some very special gems where I've been thinking about them for years. And all of a sudden, the right design will come to me. And I say, okay, that's the one for this gem. And then sometimes I have a concept that I would like to work with. Like I saw a spiral staircase. And I said, oh, I really love that idea. How could I work that into earrings? And then, I'll start to sketch and the shape will come together and go, all right, where can I put some gems into this? And then I'll select the gems to bring into it. So it can go both ways.
Your collecting of gems is not new, right?
No,
So
before I went into jewelry design, I started out as a gem collector. I had paid off all my student loans and I had some extra cash. And I said, what am I going to do with this money? Am I going to buy an apartment? I said, that doesn't sound like fun. But I'd been a rock collector when I was a kid. And for some reason, I was reading about iolite and how the Vikings used to use it to be able to tell the position of the sun on a cloudy day because you could use it to polarize. So you look through the iolite and look into the clouds, and depending on how you rotate the iolite, you'll be able to see through the clouds, kind of like a polarizing lens on a camera. So if you were like photographing a car and it had, it was too shiny, if you put a polarizing lens on the camera lens and you rotate it, you should be able to rotate it to an angle where there's no more glare on the image. And I know this from a photography background. So I was like, wow, that's amazing. What else can gems do? So then I started researching gems. And at the time, they were pretty cheap, a couple $100. That's like a pair of shoes. It was a nice pair of shoes. And I had some cash from, not having any debt. And so I started to buy gems. And then I wanted to learn more about them. So I started to take gemology classes at FIT at night. And so I was learning and collecting at the same time.
So
And
before we
FIT
yeah.
is Fashion Institute of Technology. I know it's probably common knowledge, but we have to do a shout out. And that's very cool. You got to study there. It's an amazing school.
I want to take you back a moment because you were in information technology, if I remember it correctly. You left there to take over for your father and his business, and then you went to school. Was this part of a plan at the time, or did it just happen that way?
It just happened. I was, flying by the seat of my pants. So my father always had this dream of building a villa in Jamaica and turning into a bed and breakfast. And he had been working on this part-time from his full-time business, which was he was an auto mechanic. But it was the auto mechanic that would come to your house, work on the car, and then leave. So that was his whole thing.
That's a great thing.
I think that's really great.
It was a great business idea. He was always super busy. But he's like, oh, I want to have a villa in Jamaica someday. And he bought a plot of land like near the ocean, and he designed, learned how to do architectural stuff, and he designed it himself. And every summer or every couple of months, he'd spend like a week or two in Jamaica and manage workers. And finally, 20 years later, it was almost done. And then he got quite sick. And my dad was always super crunchy before it was a thing, or candy and colored dye food was banned in our house. Forget about it. He, grew stuff in the backyard. We read every nutritional label. It's don't even think about bringing candy home for Halloween. It wasn't going to happen. And so he was very healthy. He never had reason to go to a doctor. And then all of a sudden he got very sick, and he found out he had a hereditary heart condition. And he at the time, he seemed pretty close to death. He had a stroke also because of the heart condition. And he was just so sad. And it was tough to see him that way because he was always also one of those annoyingly cheerful people. You know what I'm saying? So it was such a 180. And he just kept on worrying about this villa and would it ever get finished? And I said, you know what, Dad, I will do it. I will finish it for you. I have enough in savings that I could afford not to work for, a certain period of months, and I could pay my way there, and I could take over the project. And I was always a bit of a daddy's girl. So, while my dad was fixing a car, he'd be like, hand me that wrench. This is how the carburetor works, or all of those things. So I was very comfortable with those types of a thing. I didn't feel intimidated whatsoever. So I said, you tell me what to do, and I will take over the job and I will finish it for you. And he was instantly much happier. He didn't feel so bad about himself anymore. He wasn't so wrecked with, what have I done to deserve this and all of that. And so I went down to Jamaica and I completed the project for him. That was quite an experience. It was quite an experience.
How long did it take?
It only took it was so close. It only took like 3-4 months. It didn't take that long at all. But operating in Jamaica is very, very different than operating in America. And there are some cultural things that I did not know about because my parents really protected me from those things. But when you get thrown into that environment, you learn a lot of things.
Like what?
Well, honestly, the misogyny. The misogyny was huge. My dad had a brother who did not think that I should complete the project because I was a woman. And my dad said, no, my daughter is more skilled than you in these things. And she is also actually follows instruction and has great attention to detail. And, she's been exposed to this practically her whole life because she's been paying attention to what I've been doing. And I trust her to do it, but not you. And that made my uncle really infuriated. So he tried to block me every way possible, like not letting me have access to funds to pay the workmen, telling the workmen to do X when, my instructions were to do Y. It was very unpleasant. And I said to my dad, why didn't you warn me about this before I went? And he goes, oh, because you would have been angry.
So with this experience, is this where you learned to run a business? Is that what you took from this? Because you came back and then you went to school, but you didn't go to school for business.
No, but what I took from it was that life is short. And I also learned during that time that I had the very same heart condition that my father had. And although the people in my family, especially my dad's side, it seems to go one of two ways. Either they live to 100 or they die at 40. It would seem that the ones that died at 40 dropped dead from a cardiac arrest from this heart condition. And my dad was older than 40, but this heart condition pretty much reduced his heart to not functioning. And I'd had like heart symptoms my whole life, but because of many reasons, doctors never believed me when I said that I felt ill. But my dad's health insurance said, this is a hereditary condition. Have all of your children checked for it. And when they checked me out, I absolutely had the condition. And I thought, do I want to drop dead in a meeting that I don't care about when I already have, let's face it, enough money? Or am I going to, do something new and do something that I'm really passionate and excited about? And my professors at FIT really encouraged me to quit that job and full-time be a jewelry designer. And my boyfriend and now husband also encouraged me as well. I said, I'm tired of hearing about your like miserable work life. Why don't you quit that job and do something you actually love? Because you're poisoning the environment here. It's not worth it.
So this brings us to a bunch of other good questions that we love to get into. Your husband, he comes from another island, a little bigger than Jamaica. I think actually, although I've never compared the two, but I think it's a bit bigger. He's from Ireland, yes. Correct?
Yes.
And you have a child, correct?
Yes.
And how did you manage all of this, doing everything that we talk about on the show, being, pivoting from one career to another, making a life with your significant other and having a child? How does that factor into this change in life philosophy you went through?
Well, I feel very lucky in that although my husband and I look very different on the outside, we are the same on the inside. He's also an artist. He also worked in some non-artistic fields. He was in finance for a long time. And he said he was cursed to be good at math because everyone in his family was an engineer. So he went to engineering school to become a chemical engineer. But then he decided that wasn't enough and he wanted to come to America, and his parents thought he was crazy. And he did come to America, and he ended up in finance. And then he eventually left finance. And he said, you know what? I want to act, I want to direct, I want to write. And he does all of those things very well. He's just an incredibly multi-talented human being. So he always had that artistic bent. And he said, I would have been a writer earlier if I was allowed to do that, but it was not encouraged in my family.
Well, now he can afford to be a writer, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
When did your son come along in all of these things you've been engaging in?
He came along about 7 years ago, and I launched my business right before I got pregnant, which was
Of course you did.
crazy
Yes, you did.
and ill-advised and totally nuts. So they've kind of been growing together side by side. And my son is a joy. He has way too much energy. And like my husband, he's a bit of a wisecracker. Got two guys that like to joke all the time. I don't know how I ended up with those.
Well,
So how do you manage?
that's exactly what I was going to ask.
You
Tell
know
us
what?
about your day and how does
I
a
feel like
mom?
it swings back and forth. There are some periods where I'm very heavy duty doing one thing, and then I have to switch off and change gears and heavy duty do another. And it used to make me feel totally crazy, but by now it just feels normal. And there are some weeks or months where I'm very heavily into my business, and then others where I'm very much into helping my son with one thing or another. And I know that it's going to be that way. And until he probably grows up and goes to college, or maybe never, it's
Or
always
longer?
switching back and forth between those two things.
And
Do you have, go ahead, Christy.
do you find that this swinging back and forth? I've talked with Maura about something I called periodizing. I've got to get this done during the school year where they're in school. Then summer, something else I'll do a little lighter. Do you find that this swing centers around his schedule or some other things that are going on?
It goes around what's going on in the jewelry world and what's going on in his life. So when my son was 18 months old, he got an autism diagnosis, which was a shock to me. They said he's not, speaking. He doesn't like make a lot of eye contact. I said, well, two things. In my culture, like heavy eye contact is weird. We don't do that. And second of all, in my family, there tend to be either very early talkers or very late talkers. And I'm talking like 4 years old, or early as in like 9 months old. Like my parents claimed I was speaking in complete sentences at 9 months old. And I could believe that because I have such a desire to control my environment. And the only way to get that control is to talk and say, hey, can you do that for me, or not do that, cut that out. Whereas my son, he didn't really speak. And so they wanted to put him in like a very heavy autism program, 40
Okay.
hours a week. And I said, this makes me feel uncomfortable. I feel like you're missing out on like playtime. And I'm not sure I 100%, believe this diagnosis because he's so young. But so we kind of did a molded program where it was, we had someone come in and, teach us what would be useful for helping him to speak and communicate. We also had like speech classes or speech therapists, but then we also put him in like a daycare or a preschool where he got to play with a lot of kids. And he was assessed for the autism program in kindergarten last year. And they say, we see no signs of autism in him, zero. He is actually advanced when it comes to like the social emotional learning. And I said, do you know how many face flashcards I did with that kid on reading emotions? But I know the spectrum is big, so who knows what the future holds. But during those times, I had to focus on him. I did not want to hand it over to someone else. And besides, they would just do it for a couple hours a day. Whereas my husband and I could, keep up the program 24 hours a day. And I feel like that made a big difference.
So where does your husband fit in terms of running the home and the family and the mental load and all of that?
My husband is absolutely amazing. And he completely gets it. Also, as another creative, he understands. So I feel like we are 50-50 on everything. And during those times when I have to shift to focus on one thing or another, then he will take over my duties. And it will be like 60-40 or 70-30 him. But I also understand that during times where his career can get busier, then I'm going to do more. So we definitely do the swings together, and we communicate. Or if he sees that I'm really bogged down in something, he's like, you know what, I will take over this, that, and the other, so that you don't have to think about it and you can focus on doing that. And without a husband or a partner like that, I would not be able to do what I do. It would be impossible. I couldn't do my business. I couldn't take care of my son. I couldn't have sanity or time for myself. I couldn't run a household. It would be impossible. And I also noticed this with other colleagues of mine in the jewelry business. They also have very dedicated, spouses, families, that it really is a village. You can't do it alone.
Is it because you're both, if I'm understanding correctly, self-employed or at least have flexibility?
Yes, we both have flexibility. And I questioned my husband if he would ever consider going back to work in finance. He goes, not unless they were paying me $1 billion a year.
Right. And even then, he may not want to do it. But also, you're both creative and come from strong creative backgrounds. And it sounds like it's been a really good blend. And do you see any creativity with your son
Oh my
from this
gosh.
union?
Yes, absolutely. Which surprised me, because I always feel like whatever your parents do, you probably don't want to do it. So I said, oh, he'll probably be like an accountant or something like that, just to be different from both of us. But instead, he's very, very creative. He's very, very good at drawing. So he loves comic books, and he will try and copy the comics from comic books, or he'll watch a show or a cartoon and he'll do like a live action sketch of what's going on. And they're very good. He's at his age, he's ahead of where I was, because I remember what my drawings look like, and his are much, much better. And we do sometimes sketch together, like we'll sketch a stuffed animal or something like that. And he'll critique me. He'll be like, I think the ear is a little bigger. That the shoes look good, but I don't know. I think the legs are a little longer. I was like, listen, this is my version of what I'm seeing.
It's funny because I always thought the artistic ability skipped a generation. My father was an artist, and I can't draw a straight line. I'd like to go back a little to the jewelry. One, what are your favorite gemstones?
Oh my gosh. I love colored gemstones, and the deeper and more saturated the color, the more I love them. So one of my favorite gemstones would happen to be spessartite garnet, which I'm going to show you.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Spessartite garnet or orange garnet. Garnet can come in every color except white. So for all you January birthdays out there, you don't just have to get that kind of brownish red color. Whatever color you like, you can find a garnet.
Well, let's see. Put that up to the screen.
So it's
Wow.
this beautiful orange. It looks like fire, and I absolutely love it. I have so many of them because orange is just a color that I'm very drawn to, and it just reminds me of passion and honesty and truth. And so I love garnets. I also love emeralds, because who doesn't?
That is a
beautiful.
nice one.
Yeah, this is a beautiful.
That's pretty sizable too.
Yeah, it's about 13 carats.
That's all.
It's perfect for you, Maura. Perfect ring, right? I don't know. It might be a little heavy on my ear, but
yeah, that's true.
One of the things you mentioned, CAD design.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take that to the next level. What's the future of jewelry when you're dealing with AI, artificial intelligence?
You know what? I played with AI jewelry design when it first came out, because I wanted to test the limits of what it could and what it could not do. And it was really a fascinating experiment. And it's always changing so much. Like whatever AI was doing yesterday, it's not going to be doing the same thing today. It's really, really learning. And what I learned is that whatever it was trained on, it's very good at that. But whatever it was not trained on, it's not good at that. So let's say there are lots of engagement rings out there. So if you were to use some good prompts, you could come up with some really interesting AI engagement rings. But there is not a lot of brooch designs that these programs were trained on. So when I tried to prompt it to make some brooches, they did not look great. And brooches are much more complicated than an engagement ring. So that's where its weakness is right now. Let's say an AI company hired me to train its AI on brooches. I think I'd do a pretty good job, but I'm not going to do that, because I want designers to be able to
Well, that's good news. You're saying that it still can't replicate the creative eye. So, do you look for responsibly mined gems? How does that work? Tell us about that.
Well, when I first started collecting, that was on the top of my list. And the reason that responsible mining was so important to me is because mining happens in Jamaica. Jamaica is a big producer of bauxite, which eventually gets turned into aluminum, like aluminum foil, and also rare earth minerals. So things that you would put in your phone or in a computer. So there's a lot of mining there. And it is controversial. These mining companies say that, they mine in a way that doesn't damage the environment, XYZ, but people that live close to the mines do have health concerns. There's actually a big lawsuit going on in Jamaica right now because that some of the rainforest in Jamaica is protected and you're not supposed to mine there. But they found some pretty big bauxite deposits there, and a mining company would like to go in and mine that out. And they convinced the Jamaican government to change their definition of where and what the rainforest is. And the people that live there are not happy about that whatsoever. So they're going back and forth on it. And so when I first started collecting my gems, I was very curious about where it was mined, who mined it, and under what conditions did they mine it. And I shied away from gems where I felt that the conditions were not good. And you learn conditions by talking to other people. So I have a lot of friends and a big network of other gem collectors, gemologists, and miners. And so I could go to them and go, hey, I was considering, buying a gem from this location. What do you think about it? And they could go, oh, I wouldn't do that because, they just use straight up bombs to.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, exactly. And people get injured. They don't take it out slowly. So
have you changed your view on this, or are you still? No. Okay.
But here's the thing about any particular mine or mining situation. Just because it was good 5 years ago doesn't mean that it's good now. So you always have to go back around and ask those questions again. Or some people might say, that I got a particular gem for a particular mine and the conditions there right now aren't good. So they go, oh, that wasn't a good choice. And I go, you know what? It's recently been taken over by another mining corporation that has done some bad things. But in the past, it was owned by someone else.
Good point.
Okay.
Did a much better job.
So sourcing, what's your view on lab created gems, like in particular lab created diamonds?
Lab created diamonds are kind of shaking up the industry right now. And I know when they were first created, there were claims that they were more sustainable, but that's not necessarily true, because in order to make a lab created diamond, you need a lot of energy. You need to heat carbon pretty much to the temperature of the surface of the sun. It's hot. That's a lot of energy. But where is that energy coming from? A lot of it's coming from coal. A lot of it's coming from fossil fuels. There are lab created setups out there where they get a lot of their power from solar, especially in India. And if someone asked to source a lab created diamond, I would choose to use those sources. So you have to ask, who is producing this lab created diamond and what type of energy are they using to produce it?
Do you think it has or retains value?
No, it absolutely does not. It does not. Even this year, I think they say that the price of it has fallen 90%.
Wow.
So there are some places where it's selling for $100 a carat. So if you buy it for the look. It's not an investment. And honestly, colored gemstones are a better investment overall than diamonds, because they actually are quite rare, and diamonds not so much. Not unless it's like a D flawless over 5 carats, or a blue or pink or purple.
There we go.
There we go. That's what we should be looking for.
That's what we're looking for.
Those are great investments.
Alexia, we have to get to our classic question. Go ahead, Christy.
Okay. In your opinion, can you have it all and all at the same time?
Absolutely not. No. You can have it all, but not all at the same time. There will be certain periods where you have one thing and certain periods where you have another thing. And you have to kind of step back and look at the overall balance of things to see if that works for you or if it doesn't. And also keep in mind that just because you're doing one thing now doesn't mean you have to do it forever. I think for me, that's the only way, because if I needed to have it all at the same time, I would be terrible at everything.
Please tell
Thank
everyone
you.
where they can find you and find your jewelry.
Well, you can find my jewelry on my website, which is alexiaconnellan.com. That's ALEXIACONNELLAN.com. You can also find me on Instagram. This year, I would really like to work a lot more with custom pieces and helping people design and redesign their jewelry. So if you reached out to me via, the internet or on Instagram, I would absolutely love to work with people.
Love it. We love your stuff. So let us tell our listeners where they can find us at thebalancedilemma.com, where you can listen to old episodes and sign up for our newsletter, find show announcements, show notes, resources, and further reading. You can listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please follow us, rate us, share us. Connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and we'd love to hear from you. So if you'd like to send us an email, you can send us an email at balancedilemma@gmail.com. Thank you so much, Alexia. This has been super interesting. I'm so glad we got the chance to speak with you.
Thank you, Christie and Maura.
Thank you.